While we are blessed that many great games are multi-platform these days, there are still plenty of absolutely banging PC exclusives for those who favour a keyboard and mouse, as well as games that could only really exist in their true glory on a PC. So I want to go through some of the best PC exclusives 2020 has had to offer so far. Now I want to point out, you could have been on this list bold as late, but no, you had to go and delay and Crusader Kings 3 is a grand strategy title of enormous proportions, with a staggering level of detail and choice when it comes to the growth of your characters, dynasty, governance, realms, militaries, faiths, and much, much more. I've described it as a strategy game that has made me feel like an idiot while still absolutely loving my time with it. There is definitely a learning curve when it comes to creating your successful kingdom, figuring out what the heck a casus belli is, what each law means, how your heirs and succession work, and why your kingdom can seemingly detonate into civil war at the drop of a crown. A lot of the impenetrable layers that have traditionally been off-putting to players in CK1 and CK2 were largely addressed with the release of CK3, with the game being much more accessible to newbie rulers, having extensive tooltip systems and tutorializing the whole country of Ireland. Personally, while a big fan of strategy games and the grand strategy elements that play a huge part in Crusader Kings 3, I play it more as a virtual drama than I do a game of conquest. With the options available to you when it comes to leading your own ruler's life and influencing the lives of the courtiers and dynasty members around you, some fascinating, bizarre, and hilarious things can come to pass. Like finding out your best son and heir may not actually be your child, and choosing if you should keep that secret to ensure that the other children won't try to use their lineage as an excuse to overthrow them for the throne, or you could decide to conquer France by playing full Habsburg and keeping your bloodline pure, only for the Pope to find out and excommunicate you because you're a lot of right old dirty buggers. Crusader Kings 3 creates some real water cooler moments and bizarre, shareable stories, while its strategy is also deep enough to strain the largest of brains. Iron Harvest is a universe where the First World War was fought with giant bipedal mechs and walking fortresses. Set in the Dieselpunk world of 1920 plus, created by Polish artist Jakub Rozelski, Iron Harvest is one of the best and most interesting real-time strategy titles I've seen in quite some time. It feels very reminiscent of Company of Heroes, in the ways it makes use of terrain, cover, unit strengths and weaknesses, but with the addition of giant suits of armor and behemoths that have scythes for hands. Despite how it may sound, units in gameplay never feel gimmicky or unbalanced. A competent commander can make use of infantry for flanking, using their anti-armor weapons, and hitting weak points can take down the most powerful of mechs. Giant robots can be taken down by swarms of manpower surrounding them, or if a group of gunners are held up inside buildings, you can always just walk that giant armored thing through the brick and mortar to deal with the issue. Units also have their own special abilities, strengths and weaknesses that can be drawn upon to change your playstyle should the situation need it. Its three factions also play pretty differently if you want to lean into one playstyle more than the other, with many of the mechanized roster having attacks unique to that unit, as well as your army having their special upgrades and their own suite of heroes. I've been itching for a new RTS game to sink my teeth into for a good while, and as a big Dawn of War and Company of Heroes fan, Iron Harvest takes a lot of what made modern real-time strategy titles so enjoyable to play, strapped a big diesel engine on them, and created a game that will be recognizable to long-time strategy gamers, but plays in its own unique way. I still firmly believe that it would be a massive challenge to replicate the kind of experience that Valorant offers onto a controller. The Twitch-based, high-stakes, composed and tactical style of shooter gameplay has always been at home on PC since the early days of Counter-Strike, and Valorant owes much of its DNA to that very same 1999 Half-Life mod. For those of you who haven't played Riot's free-to-play entry in the world of first-person shooters, I often describe the game as Counter-Strike with superpowers. It combines the objective and gunplay of CS with agents built around gadgets and abilities like in Rainbow Six or in Overwatch. Much of its backbone makes it feel like a classic shooter experience, but with enough sprinkled on top to make sure it's unique and bespoke to a class of shooter fans that can be very, let's say, discerning. In an interview with yours truly earlier this year, Riot's own Anna Donlan said,
"There's a way to play this game and there's a way to experience this game that we're not entirely sure translates completely to console play. I don't know if we can ever break that perception. So we need to be really, really cautious about moving forward on those types of platforms. But I do think there's like something to crack there that our team is really excited to crack. And so what we've said is, if we feel like we can deliver this experience on those platforms, we will.
So for the time being, at least, the PC space remains the platform of choice if you're after a shooter experience like Valorant or CSGO. Half-Life is so synonymous with PC gaming, it's still widely talked about despite the fact that it has been just shy of 13 years since the release of Episode 2. Now, I know that the barrier for entry is somewhat higher with Life Alyx, as the prerequisite of a VR headset can be a hefty expense, but that doesn't detract from the fact that it is an incredible revisit to the franchise and elements you remember, while still being wholly unique to its own design choices. With the power of Valve behind it, it's no surprise that Alyx released as one of the most highly polished experiences that you can see through a headset, and potentially one that can only truly be appreciated through that medium. My favourite thing that Life Alyx does is to continue to build on the world and story that surrounded the silent Gordon Freeman for so long, tapping into recognisable characters while also being something more focused on its own story. It also brings a new genre of game within that same universe, playing out more like a survival game with resources fairly slim and headcrabs being way scarier when they are on your actual but virtual face. Headcrabs on your face! And we may have had the trip to Ravenholm and Half-Life 2 to spook us, but many sections straight up feel like survival horror. But that may also be because I'm a massive baby. It was a strange sensation, but somehow Alyx played like the Half-Life 2 I remembered, but also obviously different in every single way. I think this game is also the closest thing we've seen to a system seller for the virtual reality market. Everyone rushing to step back into the world of the Combine invasion as if G-Man himself were muttering the words right into your ears. If you're once again tempted to visit a virtual City 17, you may be in luck as stocks of VR headsets are starting to return. If you want to know exactly what headset to go for though, we have a video we did a wee while back reviewing the game on every available device. To me, Squad sits on the first-person shooter spectrum somewhere between the Battlefield series and Arma, which is unsurprising when you take into account that members of the development team worked on Battlefield's Project Reality mod. Now, this game's been on my radar for some time, but I never got around to playing it until it was fully released and came out of early access. While Squad has a drive towards realism, the main design tenet I felt most deeply is its focus on communication and coordination. It was quite jarring at first, and I admit it took some time to get used to, but once you start to get into that headspace, you realise that these huge 50v50 battles, complete with objectives, infantry and vehicles, would descend into unreadable chaos if it wasn't for you taking the time to communicate with the players around you, using VoIP within your squad, or even passing messages along to command via your own squad leaders. Crouch here. Crouch there. Fred, you legend. It's a punishing game for sure. But as is true with many games like this one, when all the pieces fall into place and you feel like you're part of a cohesive team, the rush you get from overcoming obstacles and playing as a small cog in a giant firefight, or simply surviving an unexpected ambush, well, the reward and gratification you feel far outweighs the struggle it took to get there. Yes, it's complex, yes, the developers recommend you read a whole damn wiki before you play, and no, I don't think it's going to be for everyone. But Squad sits so nicely in that spectrum I mentioned earlier, that for the players that can appreciate both ends, from Battlefield to Arma, I highly recommend giving Squad a try. If you need a game to marvel at the computing power of a PC, or just need something to make your GPU scream, then Microsoft's Flight Simulator is what you want. Other than being a game that simulates real-world planes and lets you fly them like an absolute maniac, Microsoft's Flight Simulator is absolutely mind-blowing because of its ambition to recreate every little bit of the planet Earth, right down to the street and building you're in right now. It uses map data and some fancy AI to do this, and while it's got its fair share of bizarre mistakes, like Buckingham Palace being replaced by an office block, it's pretty damn impressive the other 99% of the time. That means with its freeform flight mode, you can drop your plane anywhere you want, from your house to the North Pole to even the Great Pyramids if you fancy. You can control the time of day, the weather, if you like volumetric clouds and godlike lighting. Or you can flip a switch and have the game replicate real-world, real-time conditions, including current air traffic. It makes for some amazing virtual sightseeing, especially right now since, well, you know. The idea of flying a real-world plane in a simulation like this might be daunting to you, but you should be pleased to know that Microsoft Flight Simulator has a bunch of assists that can ease the whole burden on you. Sure, you could buy a flight stick and use your mouse to manually flick all the right switches in the cockpit, but the game also just lets you worry about going up and down, left and right, if you just want to focus on having a chill experience flying over your favorite cities. Microsoft Flight Simulator is one of those games that feels like it's heralding next gen. It's supposed to be coming to Xbox at some point, who knows when, but of course PC is where you're going to see all that cutting edge tech first. Definitely something to fire up when you get that 3090 in the mail, eventually. So those are some of the best games that hold the title of PC exclusives in 2020 so far. I may have missed out some of your favourites, so if so, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and stay subscribed to more PC gaming content at games.Com.